quorum is present. First on the agenda is Senate File 1035 from Senate Report. We will be voting to refer this bill to the Judiciary Committee. Senate Report, I understand you have an author's amendment to get the bill in the right shape.
I do, Mr. Chair. I have the A3 author's amendment, which has been done in consultation and in response to concerns raised by state and private higher ed institutions to make sure that the language is workable.
Thank you, Senator Report. And Senator Kupek moves the A3 amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? The amendment is adopted. Now, before we go to our testimony, our nonpartisan staff will walk us through the bill summary and fiscal note. So please, Mr. Watson and Ms. Birch, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll walk through SF number 1035. Section 1 of this bill, and this is the as amended. Section 1 defines retaliation. Section 2, paragraph A, establishes the grievance process requirement and requires post-secondary institutions to conduct an investigation into any report of sexual misconduct, including if the alleged perpetrator is not a student at the institution. Paragraph A also provides a list of potential remedial actions that an institution may take if it determines sexual misconduct occurred. Section 2, paragraph C requires post-secondary institutions to provide due process protections to a responding party who is a student. Paragraph C also requires a post-secondary institution to provide the responding party with sufficiently detailed written description of the alleged misconduct, including, if possible, date, time, and location, to provide the responding party with a copy of the campus code of conduct, and if the responding party is an employee, the employee grievance process must be made available if it differs from the student grievance process. Section 2, paragraph D, requires post-secondary institutions to provide academic and residential support as needed and on a case-by-case basis to both parties involved in a grievance process, including exam or assignment extensions, excused absences, or changes to a party's schedule or campus residence. Section 2, paragraph E, requires the process to provide an opportunity for reporting and responding parties to present and review evidence, including testimony and any investigation report. Section 2, paragraph F, lists specific requirements for any hearing or other proceeding held in connection with a grievance process. And these include, in Clause 1, that requires an equal opportunity for both parties to present evidence and witnesses and to retain and rely upon an advisor, including an attorney, to inspect, review, and respond to evidence and testimony, and to discuss the investigation and proceeding with advisors, parents, or guardians. Clause 2 requires a post-secondary institution to provide an opportunity for both parties to question the credibility of the other party and witnesses, to appoint a decision maker or panel of decision makers other than the investigator to assess credibility of the parties and witnesses, to allow each party's advisor to assist in formulating questions for the other party about evidence or credibility if a hearing is held, and also if a hearing is held, to provide an equal opportunity for each party to provide or review testimony without encountering the other party. It also requires the post-secondary institution to proceed with the campus grievance process concurrently with any criminal investigation if requested by the reporting party, unless law enforcement requests that the grievance process be temporarily delayed. And also to deliver the outcome of the grievance process simultaneously to both parties. Clause 3 prohibits a post-secondary institution from allowing the parties to cross-examine each other and requires any cross-examination, if permitted, to be performed by a party's advisor or an adjudicator of the campus grievance process. Clause 4 prohibits consideration of evidence regarding a party's character, including character testimony or questions or evidence about past sexual behavior or sexual preferences, except the process can consider information related to sexual behavior of the reporting party if it substantiates that the misconduct occurred and is deemed relevant. Mental health and medical information of the reporting party may be considered if the reporting party signs a waiver and non-relevant information is redacted. If a responding party is found responsible, the post-secondary institution may consider medical and mental health information to determine sanctions, and questions and evidence regarding the sexual preferences or past sexual behavior of a reporting party may be considered if offered to prove that someone other than the responding party committed the alleged misconduct, or if the past sexual behavior concerns specific incidents involving the responding party and is offered to prove consent. Clause 5 requires the post-secondary institution to, if applicable, inform parties no later than 24 hours before a decision is rendered and provide a timeline for the outcome's release, to offer community mental health resources and campus resources equitably to both parties, and not to deliver the decision at the end of the day or during a weekend or holiday. Clause 6 requires post-secondary institutions to apply a preponderance of the evidence standard in any grievance process involving an allegation of sexual misconduct against a student. And Clause 7 requires post-secondary institutions to maintain a policy regarding potential retaliation against a participant in a sexual misconduct grievance process. And I will pass it over to Ms. Birch.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, committee members, the fiscal note on Senate File 1035 was completed by the Office of Higher Education, the University of Minnesota, and the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. This is on the original version of the bill as introduced and not as amended by the A3 amendment, so that's something to keep in mind. Overall, there are expenditures, but no new net fiscal impact to the state. OHE reported that the required outreach and training will be administered by their existing Title IX training administrator within their current appropriations, so they will incur no new costs. The Minnesota State Colleges and Universities reported that they already comply with the proposed statutory changes, so they will also incur no new costs. And then the University of Minnesota reported that they will need to make some minor changes to their policies and procedures to comply, which they estimated will take about 30 hours of their equal opportunity and Title IX director's time. That person is already employed by the university, so the estimated general fund cost of $2,250 would be absorbed within their existing budget.
Thank you to staff for that walkthrough. Senator Port, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I appreciate your time hearing this bill. This is an issue that I've been working on and has been personal for me since 2001 when I was attending the University of Minnesota and was sexually assaulted. Going through the process was not a fun experience and didn't work particularly well. It led to significant difficulties for me to be able to move past my assault while at the university. And since that time, since 2001, I've continued to hear reports from students across our state who struggle to find the support and the necessary action taken by universities. The federal landscape requiring post-secondary institutions to address and respond to sexual violence has been taken up by every presidential administration since George W. Bush, which has led to confusion among students and universities and employees of post-secondary institutions. The most sweeping changes to institutions' obligations to address and respond to sexual violence occurred in the 2020 Title IX regulations, which required institutions to follow prescriptive and robust grievance procedures. This included a strict definition of sexual harassment, a required dismissal under Title IX, and a mechanism for responding parties to confront the allegations and evidence before them through a live hearing with cross-examination by a party's advisor. The 2020 regulations proved to be a costly financial and administrative lift for post-secondary institutions. The Title IX regulations released in April 2024 sought to give institutions flexibility in grievance procedures that recognized institutions' understandings of the needs of their community while maintaining strong due process procedures. The regulation's effective date was scheduled for August 1st, 2024. However, several states and organizations contested the 2024 regulations in court, which ultimately resulted in an injunction prohibiting the U.S. Department of Education from enforcing the 2024 regulations in many K-12 and post-secondary institutions across the country. This affected 17 post-secondary institutions in Minnesota, including the entire University of Minnesota and Minnesota State systems. On January 9th, 2025, a federal court judge in Kentucky vacated the 2024 regulation in its entirety. Many private and tribal post-secondary institutions in Minnesota were required to immediately revert to the 2020 regulations. This meant institutions following 2024 grievance procedures had to tell victims currently in process that their case had to pivot to the prescriptive 2020 process or was dismissed because of the 2020 Title IX regulations. Under 2020 regulation, institutions are not required to respond to allegations of sexual harassment dismissed under Title IX. Institutions had to try to retrain students and employees again in a swift time. Data from the Sexual Assault Data Report indicate a decline in reports from sexual assault from 419 in the 2020 report, which covers the 2019 calendar year, to 316 in the 2024 report, which covers the 2023 calendar year. COVID-19 likely had some impact on numbers reported in the 2021 calendar year, but institutions, advocates, and community organizations who support victims note the chilling effect of the 2020 regulations on victim reporting and seeking a formal complaint and grievance resolution process. Institutions report in this 2024 report more violent acts such as non-consensual biting, punching, and strangulation during non-consensual sexual incidents. Institutions report fatigue in changing policies and practices, financial and administrative constraints. Students and institutions require and ask for stability in this process. Reports of sexual misconduct that fall out of the Title IX jurisdiction do not have to be addressed by institutions. If it does not fit a very prescriptive and very narrow definition, institutions do not have to respond to it. Many states across the country include grievance procedures in state law, including Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Illinois. The amendment that we added ensures that victims and reporting parties have the right to seek a resolution process regardless of federal mandates. It provides consistency and stability for reporting and responding parties, and it requires institutions to offer a grievance resolution process for reports of sexual misconduct under 135A.15, not just those under the Title IX regulations. And with that, Mr. Chair, I believe there are a few testifiers.
Thank you so much for your testimony. First up on our list, we have Melissa Wachke, Title IX Administrator, Office of Higher Education. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you, Chair Fateh and committee members. I am Melissa Wachke. I am the Title IX Training Administrator at the Office of Higher Education. I am happy to serve 77 post-secondary institutions across the state, providing training and technical assistance on the campus sexual misconduct policy as well as Title IX. I am in support of this bill, of course. Just to give you a context, in 2020, an article published by the Journal of Interpersonal Violence found that students who experienced unwanted sexual contact, stalking, and relationship violence reported lower academic efficacy, higher stress in college, lower institutional commitment, and lower scholastic conscientiousness than those who reported no sexual misconduct. And that's important because what we want to do in higher ed is to get them to the finish line, for them to have the opportunity to persist and attain a post-secondary credential. Last legislative session, we worked with Senator Port on the 2024 amendments, and Office of Higher Education advised Senator Port to keep the grievance process, which is 2A, open and general, because we were awaiting the 2024 regs to be released. We knew there were going to be some changes. Little did we expect or anticipate the last 6 to 7 months here. SF 1035 creates a roadmap for institutions that provides certain protections and rights for parties and witnesses involved in the sexual misconduct grievance procedure. This bill brings stability to a very, very difficult process. Placing procedures in state statute provides the foundation that is less likely to change with each federal administration. Many of our students transfer from one post-secondary institution to another. Post-secondary students will be assured consistent process to address and respond to sexual misconduct among many post-secondary institutions in Minnesota. SF 1035 does not only address Title IX incidents, but it addresses sexual misconduct that's listed under this statute. This bill empowers victim survivors with choice as they continue their healing journey. SF 1035 offers resolution options to the reporting party through sexual misconduct grievance process, an alternative resolution process, and/or just supportive measures. This is the opportunity to do this now. The 2024 amendments go into effect August 1st, 2025. So this is a good opportunity. We can provide training and technical assistance kind of in one fell swoop at the Office of Higher Education. And so this is kind of a good place to implement these changes. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Before we move on to our next testifier, any questions from our members? Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Chloe Rainey, Associate Director from the University of Minnesota, Aurora Center. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Fata and members of the committee. My name is Chloe Rainey, and I'm the Associate Director at the Aurora Center for Advocacy and Education, which is the Campus Sexual Violence Center at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of Bill SF 1035, which amends campus sexual misconduct policies to include grievance procedure requirements. I have worked for a victim advocate for 10 years, supporting and providing legal advocacy to victim survivors of gender-based violence. For nearly 8 of those years, I have worked at the Aurora Center, where I have served victim survivors as well as represented them in sexual misconduct investigations and hearings. I'm very familiar with federal Title IX regulations and the challenges that students and staff at educational institutions face when navigating intricacies of the federal policy. Many of the provisions in Senator Port's bill are a part of the current sexual misconduct policy at my campus. However, I'm aware that not every campus has the same composition as ours, the same number of staff dedicated to this work, or access to comparable resources. This bill provides more structure for campus sexual misconduct policies and procedures so that they ensure consistent, fair, and equitable outcomes across the state, as well as due process rights for accused students. It also provides important protective measures for victim survivors of sexual misconduct. While federal Title IX regulations may shift with each administration, which can lead to varying interpretations, establishing clear Minnesota state law will provide consistent guidance for educational institutions and campus Title IX coordinators. Specifically, this bill defines the role of decision makers and advisors. It structures cross-examination and hearings and implements a preponderance of the evidence standard for student cases. The added guidance around supportive and protective measures will result in better health outcomes and higher retention rates of students and employees impacted by sexual misconduct, and I see this in my work every day. These provisions will ensure campus sexual misconduct grievance procedures are trauma-informed, student development focus, and structure to yield outcomes grounded in fairness and truth. As a victim advocate and advisor to complainants in sexual misconduct investigations and hearings, I can share that victim survivors with whom I work at the university benefit greatly from the stability that our grievance procedures provide. I have seen how a strong policy and procedures that prioritize support, civility, safety, and rights for both parties allow for a more positive experience that results in healing, emotional wellness, and resilience for students. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members? Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing with victim survivors. It's so important. I'm just curious if you've encountered any situations where a victim has requested non-disciplinary restorative justice services and what that may have looked like.
Director
Absolutely.
Rainey.
Yes, thank you. We have a number of different non-disciplinary options through our campus, and they vary in their composition and their makeup and the types of benefits that they provide. We don't offer restorative justice as we know it for victim-offender dialogue related to sexual misconduct cases. There's some conversation around the body of research there and, you know, depending on what the goal is with that, if it really meets those goals. And so, but a number of non-disciplinary options are available. So through the Title IX office, there's one called Notice and Resources Letter. So a student could potentially report something to the Title IX office, but not ask for a formal grievance process to ensue. And then the Title IX office, you know, with their permission, can send a letter to that student, the other student who may have impacted them, and let them know that some impact happened, potentially refer to a policy. I kind of talk about it like a little warning letter to be able to notify that person that they have the right to file a formal grievance procedure if they would like to in the future. There's other options as well related to coming to an agreement kind of through mediation, which is not utilized very often. And there are informal processes too that may not require a hearing if it's allowed through federal guidelines and through our sexual misconduct policy, but more so an administrative procedure where if the two parties agree, then an administrative person at the university or a body of people would decide kind of what that looks like and what the possible sanctions or outcome could be. So there are some of those available. Mm-hmm.
Any other question? Any other questions from members? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our last testifier is on Zoom, Kelly Durek Eder from the College of St. Scholastica. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Durek Eder, and I'm the Title IX coordinator for the College of St. Scholastica. I'm happy to be here, somewhat not a little bit exhausted from all the work and changes that we've had. As you are all well aware, the federal landscape has been a shifting maze of policies, regulations, and legal battles, leaving students, faculty, and administrators confused and frustrated. Since the Bush administration, Title IX regulations have been interpreted and revised multiple times, creating an inconsistent and often burdensome process for our institutions. The most sweeping changes came in 2020, where we had these rigid, narrow grievance procedures that significantly altered how we handled sexual misconduct. These regulations place heavy financial and administrative strains on our institutions, and they may have discouraged students from coming forward by mandating these intimidating cross-examination processes and strict definitions of sexual harassment. Then came 2024, designed to provide institutions with flexibility while still upholding important due process protections for respondents. These regulations aim to balance the interests of the complainants and the respondents with strong procedural protections for all. But what happened, we know that those regulations were struck down. A federal judge vacated these regulations, forcing many of the colleges, myself included, at the College of St. Scholastica to revert overnight to the 2020 guidelines. Complainants and respondents in the middle of their grievance processes were told their cases had to be rerouted or dismissed. We had adopted our 2024 regulations at the college. We had to quickly reverse course. We caused administrative chaos, confusion, and weariness for students and Title IX coordinators. I observed adverse effects on both complainants and respondents. And we were fatigued and overwhelmed. All we want is stability. This is why FF 1035 to the campus sexual misconduct policy is critical. It is damaging and draining to students and institutions to allow federal legal battles to drastically change these regulations. This amendment ensures that complainants and respondents have the right to seek a resolution process regardless of federal mandates. It provides consistency and stability for everybody involved, including Title IX coordinators, and it makes sure that we offer grievance processes for sexual misconduct outside Title IX cases. I'm asking for your support for this. Let's ensure that every student has access to grievance procedures that provide prompt, fair, and impartial processes for everybody involved, that every student has confidence in their institution's commitment to safety and due process, and that we move beyond this cycle of policy reversals towards a more stable procedure for our students that we serve. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members? Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the chief author. I see you do not have a companion in the other body for this bill. Are you working with anyone and hoping to get it introduced over there?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rarick, yes, we are. I am working with several potential authors. I am expecting it to be dropped next week.
And if possible, Ms. Oliver from OHE would like to come up to add more context. Come on down.
Hello, for the record, my name is Nikki Oliver, Director of Government Relations and Community Engagement for the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. Sorry, I was surprised to hear my name called. I guess context, this is not our bill. Obviously, we're supportive, like Melissa stated. We do have a meeting with Chair of the Higher Education Committee, Chair Rarick, next Wednesday to talk about the governor's recommendation, which aligns with Senator Port's bill, because we know and understand that she pursued this policy and was the primary reason this exists in the first place, and we wanted to get her feedback. We also, the reason it's so late, we've been trying to get a meeting with her. She's a very busy lady. We also just wanted to make sure we had as much of the institutional feedback and stakeholder feedback implemented into our changes before meeting with her as well. So that's the additional context.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver.
Thank you.
And also, Senator Rarick, this bill does have another stop in judiciary, so we're making sure that it has the stops it needs before deadline as well. But we're going to continue working with everyone. Thank you. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, Senator Uckey, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I see of course, the fiscal note was talked about at the beginning, but there is going to be some cost to the institutions. Could I get a response on what they anticipate that to be? Or if they currently have most things in play already, then but I would just like to know if it's going to be a burden.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Uckey. My understanding and in my conversations with them, they already do a lot of this work. It will just look different. And so they're not anticipating a large cost, potentially some retraining, though with the changes that have happened consistently over the last few years, they've had to consistently retrain anyway. So they're not expecting new additional outlays aside from the retraining, which they would be doing at this point anyway.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, any closing comments, Senator Port?
I appreciate the committee's consistent willingness to work and move this issue forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. And I will move that Senate File 1035 as amended be recommended to pass and re-refer to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Senate File 1035 as amended is recommended to pass and re-refer to the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is SF 1474. Senator Gustafson. Welcome, Senator Gustafson. You have 1 minute. I'm only kidding.
These chairs can't move, okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for your time. Direct Admissions is an innovative college access program that proactively accepts high school students into college based on their GPA at the end of junior year. In their senior year, students at participating high schools receive a letter informing them of the Minnesota colleges and universities, anywhere from 28 to 55 institutions where they have been automatically accepted. The program has already shown incredible success, significantly increasing FAFSA completion and college enrollment rates across all demographics. SF 1474 expands direct admission statewide, ensuring that by 2029, every Minnesota high school student has access to this opportunity. And by eliminating application fees, reducing uncertainty, encouraging students to see themselves as college material, direct admissions makes post-secondary education more accessible and helps keep homegrown talent in Minnesota, strengthens our workforce and economy. I'll just go off script here for a second. I've been a longtime high school teacher. I taught history, and there were many students who kind of show up and they just don't know the process, and so they think they're not ready. And we used to have things called College in a Day that was very similar to this, and places like Stout, and so we don't want to lose any more kids to Wisconsin, but places like Stout would come in and sit down with them and walk them through the whole process, and at the end of the day, they would be accepted, and they'd hold up a big sign, and they walked away just knowing that, and had nobody done that for them, it might not have worked. So you can see, I believe, the handouts there that list all of the colleges. There's also, they're not just four-year universities, there's lots of different two-year schools and vocational schools from all over the state. There's also some private colleges. I see Moorhead State on there is where I graduated from, so go Dragons. But there is a lot of opportunities here, and it's really good for students. It really builds their confidence quite a bit, and it's good for our workforce. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Senator. We'll now go on to our testifiers. Our first testifier is Matt Shaver, Senior Policy Director at Allies. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Chair Fate, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Matt Shaver, and I'm the Senior Policy Director for Med Allies. We're education advocates who work to ensure rigorous and engaging education for all students. I'm here today to testify in favor of Senate File 1474. I want to thank Senator Gustafson for her leadership on this bill that seeks to scale statewide the best-kept secret in education programs in Minnesota. Given that a K-12 policy guy has gotten lost and stumbled into a higher ed hearing, I'm going to keep my comments brief. The actual expert students will be able to speak to the impact and importance of direct admissions far better than I will be able to. So I'll just say this. The Office of Higher Education and Aaron Salzak specifically deserve a tremendous amount of praise and gratitude for their work in establishing and running this program in partnership with high schools throughout the state to provide students with the information and opportunity to make informed choices about their future. Combined with North Star Promise and fostering independence grants, Minnesota has braided together programs that literally change trajectories of lives. About 1/4 of high schools in Minnesota already participate in direct admissions, and the outcomes for kids who attend those high schools and participate in direct admissions are impressive. Higher rates of FAFSA completion and college enrollment than in non-direct admissions high schools. And those trends have largely held across demographic groups as the program has scaled. Direct admissions creates a direct pipeline to certificate programs, associate degrees, and four-year degrees, and will help keep our homegrown talent in state. Parents all throughout the state will be grateful for keeping their kiddos in state as well and making sure they're not going to college too far away. The Office of Higher Education, in talking about this program, has said, all students are college material, and that's a wonderful message, and it sets a high bar for our students in Minnesota. But it's a meaningless message if all doesn't actually mean all students. Already, tens of thousands of high school seniors have gotten this message, but it should not be up to zip code or chance that dictates whether a student attends a high school that offers this opportunity. Every child deserves it, and Senator Gustafson bills guarantees it. I want to thank you again for her leadership, as well as Senator Duckworth for signing on after the bill's stop in education policy. And I'll finish here. Setting a date for when we can guarantee that all kids can go to direct admissions high schools is critical for this program to realize its full potential. It demonstrates how serious we are about ensuring that all means all. It will likely take some additional resources to get there, and I want to make sure the committee recognizes that Senate File 1474 requires participation for all high schools by the start of the 2029 school year, which gives us 3 budget sessions to get the funding right. Don't let potential funding needs gatekeep the progress this bill promises. And let's mean it when we say all kids are college material. Thank you all for your public service to our state.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Our next testifier is on Zoom, Talia Treblehorn, student from Minnesota State University, Moorhead. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you, Chair Fate. Thank you, committee members. My name is Talia Treblehorn, and I am a student at Minnesota State University, Moorhead. And I'm proud to say that I directly benefited from the direct admissions program when I graduated high school in 2023. The transition from high school to college is hard, and the process to get into college is even harder. My senior year of high school was extremely stressful, and I spent the whole year filling out college apps, filling out the FAFSA application, maintaining my GPA, and researching various institutions to see if they were the right fit for me, all while working multiple jobs so I could afford to go to college. I'm not alone in that experience, and I even benefited because I had my mom and my brothers to help me. Not everybody in my hometown is lucky enough to have that support. Thousands of high school students share my stress of planning in the next steps. In my senior year at Faribault High School, I was called in for a meeting with my counselor. During this meeting, I was informed that my cumulative GPA had placed me in the Tier 6 category of the direct admissions program. This meant I was automatically accepted to a wide range of institutions, 2-year, 4-year, public, and private universities in the state, as long as I completed each application as instructed. This also meant my application fee to those schools were waived. Knowing I was already college material freed me to focus on figuring out which school was best for me and exploring my financial aid options rather than waiting for an acceptance letter. As others have said, only about 1/4 of Minnesota high schools are participating in this, and a large majority are in the Twin Cities and metro area. It's creating a rural-urban divide and pushing some of our rural students out into different states, going to schools such as NDSU, SDSU, and the Wisconsin system. We're losing our homegrown talent and hurting our economy by doing this. I would also like to emphasize that the underlying data for this program already exists. Schools keep our GPAs, colleges have well-defined admissions criteria, and the main cost in this program is just coordinating those systems. Rather than adding more burdens, direct admissions lifted barriers both financially and emotionally for me. I firmly believe that every high school senior in the state should get this opportunity and urge you to advance Senate File 1474. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Rue Larson, who's a student from Normandale Community College. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Fate, and thank you, members of the committee, for inviting me here today for the opportunity to share my experience with the direct admissions program as a PSEO student. My name is Rue Larson, and I'm a second semester PSEO student at Normandale Community College. I'm studying data analytics, and I am also currently interning as a student advocate with LeadMN. I'm here today to testify in support of SF 1474 direct admissions expansion. Today, I wanted to come and share my story of how direct admissions and the opportunity to be a PSEO student has helped me. I wish I could say that becoming a PSEO student was fully my decision, but unfortunately, that was not the case. This program was a way to get out of and leave my high school where I faced lots of bullying, which included physical and verbal harassment for being an out transgender man. I did not know that PSEO was even an option until the harassment got so bad that I ended up having a meeting with my counselor and sharing my concerns with her. This is when she shared the idea of the PSEO program. During a time I was struggling, she took one thing off my plate and listed a local schools to help get out of my high school, which was based off my GPA and different colleges that I would be accepted into. Having that simple list took away stress and uncertainty during a difficult time. It opened the door to something I didn't know I had access to and helped me find the right fit at Normandale. Now that I'm in an environment where I don't have to look over my shoulder every day walking down the hall, I can instead fully engage in my academics and my school community. At Normandale, I can be my truest self as an openly trans man and feel supported not only by my classmates, but also my professors. I can say that having access to PSEO has helped me not only academically, but socially, emotionally, and mentally. At Normandale, I have grown into my leadership roles on campus as I am in the process of creating the first ever trans rec sports league and with Lead MN. With Lead MN, I helped organize Advocacy Day when being selected as a student advocate intern for my region to build a model on-campus advocacy. And I'm here today sharing my story so that every high school student in Minnesota will have the same opportunity that I did to attend a direct admissions high school and benefit from the doors it opens. I never imagined I could do all these things at the age of 17. Being a PSEO student wasn't my original plan, but direct admissions met me where I was and showed me post-secondary education was an option for me. No matter what a student is going through, the simple list of what can come next is powerful. Thank you, committee members, for your time and for the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have our next testifier on Zoom, Michaela Anderson, student from Rochester Community and Technical College. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chair Fate, and thank you, members of the committee, for inviting me here and for the opportunity to share my experience on the direct admissions program. So my name is Michaela Anderson, and I'm a PSEO student at RCTC, Rochester Community Technical College, pursuing a future in nursing.
Hi, Michaela.
And like many students,
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you mind turning on your camera so we can highlight it?
oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought it was working. Can you see me now?
Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So kind of like I was saying before you, basically, I'll start over. Yeah. So my name is Michaela, and I'm a PSEO student at Rochester Community Technical College, RCTC, pursuing a future in nursing. Like many students, I face the stress of college planning, like wondering where I'll be accepted and how I'll afford applications. And that is why I talked about direct admissions and why this program removes barriers and helps college students more accessible for Minnesota students in high school and all over. So as I would explore my options of enrolling a PSEO student and knowing which schools had accepted me, I think it made the process a lot easier. For example, like knowing RCTC was close to home, offered a nursing program I wanted, and would also support my pathway in becoming a nurse. And this allowed me to balance my classes with my other interests, like volunteering, jobs, and family responsibilities. Additionally, my counselor provided me with a helpful list of schools and walked me through the process of all my options, and also made this decision way less overwhelming. So right now, I think only like one fourth of Minnesota high schools offer direct admissions, and I feel very fortunate that my high school is a direct admission high school. And I don't know if I will be on the pathway I am without the clear options and waived application fee. So yeah, from there, of course, like expanding direct admissions statewide and making sure that every public high school and student in Minnesota has the same opportunities regardless of their zip code. So my closing thoughts are, as a future nurse, I know how important it is to have clear pathways to success. And I think it doesn't matter. I think it doesn't matter as far as like, your high school career versus college, being able to have that clear path and starting early is very crucial. And expanding direct admissions statewide can show that every student in Minnesota that they have a future in education within their home state. So let's break down barriers and make college access the standard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Mike Dean, Executive Director from North Star Prosperity.
Thank you, Chair Fate, members of the committee. My name is Mike Dean. I'm the Executive Director of North Star Prosperity. We work to expand opportunities for every Minnesotan to achieve economic freedom and build a meaningful future. I'm here to encourage you to support Senate File 1474. The Direct Admissions Program is a pathway for giving students more educational choices and bridging the gap between opportunity and access. Minnesota is at a critical moment in post-secondary education. While we've been leaders in educational achievement, ranking 6th nationally with 94.3% of residents holding a high school diploma or higher, there is growing concern about the steep decline in college enrollment. According to Minnesota SLED's data, enrollment among high school graduates has dropped from 70% to 60% over the last decade. This trend has serious implications for our economy and our workforce. And the challenge we face are clear, but we have an opportunity to act decisively. Programs like Direct Admissions and the North Star Promise have helped students see a range of options available to them after high school, from technical training to associate or bachelor's degrees. These initiatives simplify the application process, highlight affordable pathways, and provide flexible opportunities for students to balance life responsibilities while pursuing their further education. I do want to raise one concern about this bill, and that is that we can't wait until 2029 to implement it. Minnesota students and workforce needs these changes immediately. I urge this committee to build upon the pilot success and ensure that every high school in Minnesota participates by 2027. Accelerating the timeline will allow us to meet the urgent economic challenges we face and ensure more students can pursue higher education without delay, especially in Greater Minnesota, where adoption of the direct admissions program has been slower. Thousands of high school students in Greater Minnesota currently feel forced to leave their communities to find opportunity, even though local community colleges offer robust programs that could prepare them for fulfilling, lucrative careers right at home. The decision before you is one that will shape the future of our state, and expanding Senate 1474 means more than streamlining access. It signals a commitment to ensuring that young Minnesotans have a direct, viable pathway to advanced training and sustainable careers right here at home. When you support this measure, you help anchor our communities by retaining local talent and bolstering the industries that drive our economy. I ask you to support Senate File 1474. Let us act with urgency and resolve that every Minnesota high school graduate, from the Twin Cities to the farthest reaches of Greater Minnesota, is given the opportunity to build a stable and fulfilling future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dean, for your testimony. Next up, we have Karina Villeda, student, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, who is on Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Karina Villeda, and I'm a mother, a student, an advocate, and a future lawyer, and I'm delighted to share my story here with y'all. Several women have motivated me to be here today. I'm here for the mothers across Minnesota who deserve better, and I'm here for my daughter who deserves a bright future. And I'm here for my mom who taught me that you can achieve your goals through hard work and sacrifice. My mom was a Salvadorian immigrant who didn't speak English, but yet managed to open a thriving grocery store for 15 years. She worked around the clock to provide me and my siblings with a better life. Her commitment to our future was undeniable. However, my mother couldn't teach me how to navigate the complex higher learning landscape. We didn't discuss college in our home because it was a shared assumption that it was out of reach. Frankly, we thought that only rich white people went to college. In high school, no one sat me down and talked to me through my options. There was no guidance counselor that told me I had college potential. So when I graduated in 2014, I did what everyone in my family did and in my community. I got a job. I moved to Burnsville and I became a full-time bartender at the casino. I had no flexibility, poor benefits, and I worked long hours. I did that for about 8 years. And sometimes it takes a disruptive force to make you pause and examine your life. And 2021 brought that for me. That was COVID and the birth of my daughter, Luna. COVID forced me to examine the impact my job was having on my health. And Luna gave me the purpose that had been dormant inside of me. She gave me permission to dream of a better life for me and her. So I am college material. And since I've been enrolled as a student, I've earned internships, scholarships, fellowships with organizations here in Minnesota and in Washington, D.C. I was president of Lead Amen, the student advocacy organization representing community and technical college students across the state. I've become a higher education advocate, testing at the Capitol dozens of times. And yet, if it wasn't for the confluence of life events that brought me to seek better opportunities on my own, I would still be bartending at the casino, working 50 plus hours sometimes a week. A program like direct admissions would have been transformative for me. A first generation, non-traditional, with tremendous potential. Instead, I was left to navigate the wild, wild west of higher education by myself. Direct admission reduces barriers to learning and creates paths for students who lack the guidance and the support. Minnesota has many incredible options for students in the metro, suburbs, and rural areas, and we know higher education is still the most reliable path towards the middle class. But what about the students who don't know they can take that step? High school should not be the final chapter in a student's journey. Expanding direct admissions is more than a policy initiative, it's an investment in Minnesota students. By removing unnecessary obstacles to college access, we empower students from all backgrounds to pursue their dreams. This program not only helps break free from cycles of limited opportunity, but it also strengthens our communities by cultivating a diverse, skilled, and motivated workforce. Imagine a Minnesota where students, regardless of where they came from or the challenges that they have faced, have a direct route to higher education. An expanded direct admissions program would mean that talented students are no longer left behind, like myself. It has the ability to be a program that can tell students like, hey, college is affordable and we have programs like the North Star Promise and many free tuition scholarships that private colleges have. It would mean that the potential of millions of Minnesotans is recognized and nurtured from the moment they finish high school. Chair and members of the committee, I urge you to support and expand direct admissions in Minnesota. Let's break down the barriers that that keep our students from realizing their potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Dr. Wendy Robinson as well as Aaron Salasek, both from OHI. Welcome, introduce yourselves for the record, and begin.
Thank you, Chair Fateh and members of the committee. It's nice to see you all again. For the record, my name is Wendy Robinson, and I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for Programs, Policies, and Grants at the Office of Higher Education. And I've had the good fortune of being able to work with the Direct Admissions Program pretty much since it was funded in the 2021 legislative session. The last time I was here, I gave you a sneak preview of our legislative report, which is now out in the world, so you can read the entire thing. I won't reiterate the success and the findings and some of the data that we shared last time. I want to take a moment just to say, we're incredibly proud of the success of this program. We know that we are recognized across the country for having the most comprehensive and wide-scale direct admissions model because we do have all types of institutions represented. And we're grateful that we've gotten to this point through the collaboration between OHI, through our K-12 stakeholders, and our higher education partners as well. But one thing I want to clarify, I think is important to say in a public space is that direct admissions is more than just a letter. We talk a lot about the letter that every student gets as part of direct admissions, and we think that's a critical component. But that is just one part of what happens when a school becomes part of the direct admissions program and some of the work that we've been able to do in conjunction with direct admissions. Direct admissions is also the events that the high schools put on where they pull all of their students into an auditorium and everybody gets their letter at the same time and they all get to sit in their peers and all find out together the names on their lists and all get that message that they are all college material. Direct admissions is the parent sessions that we have at the high schools where we talk to the parents about what this program means and what it means for their students. Direct admissions is the videos that we've created around how to apply for FAFSA, how to access financial aid, how to interpret a financial aid letter, some of the resources that we're putting together with that. Direct admissions is also professional development for high school counselors. Through some funding that we secured from the Lumina Foundation, by the end of this year, we'll have the opportunity to provide professional development and continuing education units for over 200 high school counselors to help them learn more about the direct admissions program, to learn how to best implement direct admissions, and then also to do ongoing training around financial aid and other sort of hot topics in college admissions. Those relationships have been really critical and I think have been really beneficial for us as an agency, and I think also for the high schools that are participating. As you know, full-scale implementation of direct admissions to all public high schools has always been the goal, and we feel really excited about the progress that we've made so far. We also recognize that we want to implement a program that is continually improving, that we are always assessing our processes to make sure that they're the best that they can be, and that we're also creating a model that doesn't put undue burden on already overtaxed high school counselors. And so a lot of the work of how direct admissions works really happens behind the scenes at OHI in terms of the technical support, the data cleaning, the outreach, the marketing, all of those components. And so as we're committed to continuing to scale, why don't you just be really mindful that we scale in a way that makes sure that the program continues to work and do the work that we want it to do without having undue burdens on high schools or unmet expectations for our students if we're not able to scale it at a pace that's appropriate for the level of staffing and resources that we have. I'll turn it over to Aaron Salasek, who really deserves all the credit for the tremendous success of direct admissions this year, just to talk about kind of where we're at now and some of our recommendations for continued growth of the program.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Chair Fateh. Committee members, it's good to be back. For the record, my name is Aaron Salasek. I'm the Direct Admissions Coordinator at Office of Higher Education. I also want to thank all of the different partners that make this work possible. The report that you have in front of you, I'm going to actually be referencing pages 28 and following. It might seem a little odd that I'm going to start with some of the challenges, but I think they're necessary to understanding how we scale successfully, as well as why we have the recommendations we do. I also want to state that even though I'm starting with challenges, we do feel strongly that they're not insurmountable, that they can all be overcome. And so we've really targeted 4 specific areas. The first is administration. The second is the communications around the program. The third is technology, and the final is fidelity of implementation, so scaling the program in an equitable manner. In terms of administration, I do want to emphasize what Dr. Robinson was hinting at, which is a simple but sad fact that we just have one of the worst student counselor to student ratios in the state of Minnesota. And so we're really trying to be strategic about not putting any more onus on the folks at the high school level who are really the heartbeat of the program. The counselors, the Career Center staff, and others are those who are sharing the information with students and families, those who are doing the work in the classrooms, hosting events, and so on. Without them, quality assuring the student information, making sure that students have information about the tier that they're in an accurate tier, what does that even mean? The program won't be successful. In terms of one other administrative component, OHE has continued to assess the amount of time it takes for counselors to engage. This is sort of a matrix answer, but our high schools on average state it's somewhere between 40 and 80 hours, but also noting that in successive years, that amount of time to set up and successfully implement the program does decrease pretty substantively, almost half in the second year. And so taking those two things into context, in terms of 2 other administrative challenges I'd like to share with the program. The first is contracts. We are sharing student data. We have to comply with federal and state law around sharing student data. And so each of the high school partners and or at the district level, if they choose to go in as a district, have some pretty stringent data sharing agreements that we have in place with them. We have that on the continuum also with all the post-secondary partners. And those all extend through 2028 as of right now. Last one, which I just wanted to mention, since this is the committee, I feel like it's most appropriate to bring this up to in some ways. But we do have a challenge in Minnesota with transcripts. There is no universal transcript process. If you walk from one district to another, their process, their vendor, how a student requests their transcript and so on, can be very different. That is a challenge because one part of college admissions is providing that final transcript to all of our post-secondary partners. We're very happy that students are being judicious in their choices through direct admissions. Again, the median was about 4 responses through direct admission. But we do also want to acknowledge that direct admission can't solve the transcript challenge across the state of Minnesota for all of our secondary partners. In terms of communication with students, and this is referenced several times throughout the report, so I'd ask you to give it a close read, but we do know still that the earlier the communication notification process goes out to students and families, the more likely they are to take advantage of direct admissions as an opportunity and to continue with the process of college enrollment. We all know that students need behavioral nudging. And so if we can start the process and time it to College Knowledge Month early in the fall, the program is more successful. And again, there's some graphs that support that in a broad sense. Lastly, we are also equally working with all of our college post-secondary partners. Each of them have independence in terms of how they ingest the data, follow up with students, communicate to students about direct admissions, but the promise remains the same, that they extend an offer of proactive admission. That being said, I think we do have work ahead of us as an agency to support our colleges in their responsiveness and what they're communicating to students in terms of next steps. Technology. There are 5 student information systems across the state of Minnesota, and these are kind of ruled or governed by EdFi compliance through MDE. Currently, 2 have reports fully set up in their technology platforms that our counselors are familiar with how to use. A third has a supporting report, and one more is in development, hopefully to launch by this fall. That being said, our hope is that we continue to use the technology that our partners have available to them to successfully scale, again, without adding any additional onus upon our high school counselors. And lastly, and I think I've already said this in some ways, but it's not just that students are getting the messaging, but it's also when they're getting the messaging. And so as we continue to support our high school partners, as we continue to streamline the data and make it sort of a quicker continuum, our hope is that students are continuing to hear that validation on college admissions as soon as possible. That being said, we do have the goal of scaling next year to 100 additional high schools. That would put us at about 38% of the high schools across the state of Minnesota, but we're already going to be past the 50% mark of students, senior students across the state. We have plans to centralize some of the key technology components to, again, continue to reduce the onus on our high school counselors. In other words, giving them time back to share more about the program rather than have to run the program. We are simplifying the academic tier structure. The program manager in me really likes and loves that sort of dorky component, but in the long run, what that means is that it's gonna be even more accessible and available to more students across the state because we're gonna be doing away with the second part of the academic review criteria of the C average letter grade or higher in those core areas, which is really exciting. So it's gonna be 5 tiers next year, all unweighted cumulative GPA based. That comes with a slate of challenges that we need to consider as an agency. And so we're already doing work on how do we do so in a manner of equitably scaling and considering and centering our students who are utilizing special education resources at the schools, multilingual learners. What about our competency-based high schools that are across the state? So we have to take all of that into consideration as we scale as well. We'll continue to work and support our high schools at the earliest possible convenience so that they can implement the survey sending to students early. And we'll continue to partner in all of the ways with all of the community members who are engaged in the good work, because we do believe that all students should benefit from direct admissions. That's always been our goal. And so even though we don't have a stance on the bill, we're excited about the bill.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Senator Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said that you're planning on doing as much of the work as possible to ease the burden off of the schools. So is there a fiscal note that's going to be required, more staffing, anything like that for you to accomplish this bill to get to every single school out there?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Eric. There is a fiscal note that we're working on to accompany this as well.
Senator Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess before I would get into too many more of my questions, is this bill going to education finance, or is this the last stop?
Ed policy. Education policy.
It is going to ed policy yet?
If I can weigh in as a member of ed policy, we did hear the bill there.
Correct. So it says it's getting re-referred back to ed
Going back
policy.
to ed policy, okay. All right, well, if it's not going to be an ed finance, and I guess one of my worries is, especially around the comment that was made by one of the testifiers that this should be implemented by 2027 rather than 2029, as the bill states, that is going to put costs on our schools, because I believe from the testimony we just heard, Office of Higher Education would not be fully ready to implement this for every school across the state. And as we've listened to superintendents in our Education Finance Committee this year, with 60-plus mandates that came in 2023 and 30-plus more in 2024, they are not ready for this. I'm not going to say it's not a good program and it doesn't benefit kids, but you know who wasn't here at the testifiers table today? High schools who have to do this. And if we've listened to what they've said, please, no more mandates. And that's what this is. I just visited one of my small rural high schools, and I asked their counselor about this program in particular. And her response was, I would love to, but we can't manage it at this point, but I have a relationship with every single one of my students from 10th grade on. But if we know better here in St. Paul and we do this mandate again and tell them what they have to do, I think that's the wrong approach. And as we listen to this testimony, we have a pilot program that has been successful. There is a plan to roll it out. And if it's doing what it's doing, as many schools as possible will be looking to get into it on their own instead of us telling them they must do it. That's the path we should be on. Let the pilot program work. Let us get out to our schools and advocate for it, and they will bring it on when they believe they can and when OHE is actually ready to administer it statewide.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Rarick. I hear your passion and your anger on this topic, and you know that I share a lot of the school funding concerns that you have as we sit in Ed Finance together. I just want to point out, this is being done in many schools already. So this isn't a new thing on schools. For a lot of schools, they're already doing this. We're just trying to make it available to all schools. So 56 counties are participating in direct admissions, and I can tell you, all of them in my district are. And I can tell you as one of the high school teachers who saw this in action, you're talking about one high school counselor who has to maybe, and Centennial's a large school, so this was, no small thing, but a lot of students interested in it. You're talking about maybe one high school counselor who's sitting down with a group of students who are interested in this or going through transcripts that are already readily available. And a lot of the work, too, comes from the college visits that come in during the week, where they can sit down and sort of walk through those things with the students. But that's on the higher ed side of it, where they come in and they sort of pitch their programs and, give them the different features of the schools that they might be interested in. What this would do then is it takes those transcripts that are already there and available to schools, and it says you automatically qualify for this and you automatically qualify here. It just streamlines it. It isn't as onerous on school counselors as it maybe sounds, and I apologize if I didn't maybe explain that a little bit more, but it really isn't something that is going to take an enormous amount of staff power in the school counselors. It will take some, but it isn't stuff that is going to be so taxing on them that they're not already doing. And so I would love, it's maybe super not convenient for you, but if you find yourself in my district, I would love to take you to one of the schools and have you show you kind of what it looks like in person, or you feel free to talk to somebody at one of my schools. It really is a program that is a lot simpler than maybe it was implied in the bill. But I do share your concern on this about just in general having more school funding. So that would be what I would have to say.
Thank you. Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing forward the bill. Senator Gustafson, I'm a huge fan of direct admissions. But I did have a question for OHE because I remember when you were here a few weeks ago talking about direct admissions and shared that by next year you'll be in 4 of the 5 technology systems that our schools use. I'm reading in the report that remaining SIS vendor's been unresponsive. So do you know how many schools are under that specific vendor, and is there an ability for them to move to a different vendor, or do you feel hopeful about conversations that maybe we would get there by the 2029 school year? Just wanting a better sense of how many schools are impacted by that specific vendor and what the path forward is. Thank you.
Mr. Salasik.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Oumou Verbeten. At the moment, in this cohort year, 30 schools were under that specific vendor. They are pretty well utilized throughout greater Minnesota. We do have conversations going on with some of our colleagues at Minnesota Department of Education because, as I've said earlier, in the technology platforms, they are governed under EdFi certification standards. And one possibility could be that direct admissions as a reporting component in those technologies becomes a requirement of EdFi. And that would help with any remaining student information systems who might not be engaging in the program yet. And since 4 of them are already engaging, I don't think it would be a heavy lift on those technology partners.
Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the answer. And Senator Gustafson, did you have anything you wanted to add on that? That was one of my only concerns, but I appreciated that you had this timeline for schools to get into compliance. And I don't know if you've heard anything about the vendor or just the ability to move into that new system so that they're ready to participate in direct admissions.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Oumou Verbeten. And just really quick to go back, I misspoke. 1/4 of Minnesota high schools in 56 counties, not 56 counties. There's only 56, but okay. The date was picked. It was based on the Office of Higher Education's 2024 report in the program. So we're just trying to stay consistent. Yep, we would love to have it be sooner, but we also want to give people time to do it right. So.
Thank you. Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Gustafson, for bringing this bill. And to Senator Eric's concern about the resources and the expectations that we have for public schools right now, I think some context is very important. Firstly, in that, well, for my own example, for instance, St. Cloud Public Schools have a perfectly balanced budget, but that's because our superintendent didn't spend one-time money on long-term commitments. A lot of the school districts in our state right now are struggling because they spent COVID money on long-term commitments instead of doing so responsibly. And that's also my way of saying my superintendent is better than yours. But I will say, I got a text from her just now, because I was texting her back and forth about this issue, and she said that one of her concerns, she's not worried about the money. She is now because of fears of what's happening in the federal government, but she's not worried about paying for this necessarily out of her own situation. She doesn't see it as an economic burden, but she is concerned about navigating what she called rigorous data requirements. Could someone speak to that a little bit? So that's her primary concern, is a practical one. It's not about resources, it's about that issue.
Dr. Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Forte and Senator Putnam. And I'll take the first part, and then I'll defer to Aaron to talk about the data requirements. I just want to note that there's no cost for high schools to participate. So when they opt into direct admissions, they don't get a bill from OHE. In fact, it's usually the reverse, that they get a little bit of a stipend from us to support the time that the counselors are spending, or some other college exploration activities for that school, which is a really small additional benefit for them at this point. I think the resource constraint is more the staff time, but again, just to clarify that there's not that a fiscal note attached to it for them. I think in terms of the data requirements, one of the things as we built the program in collaboration with our K-12 partners and our higher education partners was wanting to make sure that the students, when they got their letter, when they got entered into the system, that they could choose the school that was proactively admitting them, that they could do that with the colleges, having a lot of confidence that, yep, these are the right students, they got the right list. We've checked for things like, are they still on track to graduate? Is there anything, weird in their credits that we need to address? If they're a school that has a different type of requirement, like it's competency-based versus GPA-based, that we've kind of accounted for that in that process. We also just want to make sure that student data is obviously really well protected, that it's not released without student consent, that it's going to the right places. And so, that part is probably where some of the work comes, but it's also really critical to make sure that student data is handled in the way that it needs to be handled. But I'll defer to Aaron to elaborate on that.
Yes, thank you for the question, Chair. Thank you, Senator Putnam. There are 14 basic fields that are exchanged through the program: first name, last name, student Mars ID, things of that nature. There's also 7 supplemental fields that a student, should they choose to fill them out, they don't have to. That is our agency's attempts to start beta testing what a universal application would look like for the program, which, as you can imagine, across disparate higher ed systems is a big goal, but it's a goal of ours nonetheless. In terms of, I don't know if this is the term you used, onerous data transmission, I believe that your district had a student information system vendor that is yet to be set up. That vendor actually should be set up by this fall. And so really one of the key reasons we've been paying such close attention to that partner group in this whole program supply chain is because they have the data and they can produce it in a report that's easily ingested and shareable across the data continuum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for that answer. I wanted to clarify as well that I'm hearing back that it's not in any sense a burden or an owner's challenge. Counselors are doing a lot of this work already anyway, so it isn't really some tremendous imposition. But to clarify what our superintendent just said is that it's that initial setup of the data situation. And once that initial extra work is done to set it up, it's going to be fine. And again, in no sense a burden or a mandate or a problem.
Thank you. Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think after the my friend to my right here commented, I think we got a game on when we talk about who's got the best superintendents. I've got some really good ones, but they happen to tell me that it is the unfunded mandates from the last 2 years that are sinking their ship. And they give me a lot of data to back that up. But anyhow, that's a whole nother topic. But back to this one, the first testifier today said additional resources will be needed and basically referred to the fact that that's why it's out to 29. And then now we're talking about the resources are no big deal. Who can verify that? I mean, when I hear additional resources are needed and we got 3 years to do it, sounds like it's substantial. We need clarity on that.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Utke. Yes, and when I was talking earlier, I was talking more about our college in a day that we used to have at our high school. But I think Senator Putnam is right, and obviously his superintendent connection is pretty legit. So I think it is the setup. It is that initial setup, what they're doing, you know, the job that the school counselors are doing syncs up with what this program would do. They're doing this work anyways. And so it is just that, it's that setup and making sure that there's just the time for this to become one of the things that they're doing. It is not meant to be onerous. It is just using the data that is already available and applying it to direct admission for kids who are already qualified to be going to college. And part of how we are doing that to support them is to make sure that we're not rushing it. So if that helps, and then it looks like we've got other
Dr.
people.
Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Fateh, members. One thing I would note is that direct admissions is a very, very lean program. The direct admissions staff is essentially sitting next to me. Direct admissions right now is a program that's serving close to 200 schools and will be serving 300 in the fall. Currently has 1.5 FTE dedicated toward that work. And so when we talk about the additional resources, I do think that OHE will need some additional staff to make sure that we're handling the work of program implementation, of troubleshooting, of the communication, of the data transfer and data cleaning as we reach scale. I don't think we need a tremendous increase in resources. I think we would ultimately, I think our fiscal note is requesting another 1.5.
Yep.
So ultimately trying to get us to three positions to serve 800 high schools and every high school student, senior in the state.
Senator Utke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what you just referred to would be state costs for a fiscal note. Do we have any ideas? Anybody weighed in on the local impact? That's the part I'm really after is, you know, I'm hearing it isn't a big deal, but data counts. Would really like to see something there.
Dr. Robinson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Fateh and Senator Utke. So again, the schools don't pay anything to participate in the program. The resource constraint from them is largely staff time. And so as Aaron had mentioned earlier, we are, based on what we've been tracking from the feedback from participating schools right now, the staff time is somewhere between about 40 and 60 hours in the first year, and then but goes in about half of that in subsequent years. So there's a heavy lift for the first years. They're figuring out the model, they're getting it set up, they're figuring out what additional programming they want to do with students around this. They're working really collaboratively with us to do any troubleshooting that we need to do. And then as they get up and running, it's kind of smooth sailing from there. And I think one of the things that indicates that the effort level for schools that have joined the program so far is sustainable is that we don't have schools that, so far, when schools have opted in, they're continuing on year after year. And so I think our churn rate of schools opting in, saying, okay, nope, it's too much work, we don't want to do it, we're simply not seeing that at this point. And so it is, we want to be realistic that it does require some additional effort from them on the front end. But once they're set up, I think that level of effort will decrease in subsequent years.
And Ms. Bursch, any additional information?
Yeah, Chair Fateh, Senator Utke, as has been alluded to, a fiscal note has been requested and is currently in progress by the the Office of Higher Education, the Department of Education, Minnesota State Colleges and Universities, and the University of Minnesota. But as you know, that only addresses state costs. But I'm happy to work with you to submit a request for a local impact note if that's something that you would be interested in.
Senator Utke?
I've got one more follow-up question, which might help us as we collect data there. But you mentioned 40 to 60 hours. On an average high school, is that one person 40 to 60 hours to set it up, or is there more needed? I mean, we're looking at a week and a half, but I'm wondering if is it an individual or is it multiple people to do an average high school?
Mr. Salasik?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Utke. It actually is multiple individuals at the high school level. Everybody from the high school counselors, the technology specialists. In some instances, if they have like a communications manager that would do work around like the FERPA Tennyson notification. So it's collectively that much time.
Senator Utke?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I'm into the clarity thing, but the 40 to 60 hours isn't collective. That's for each one of those individuals that you mentioned, right?
Mr. Salasik?
Chair, Senator Utke, no, we ask them to approximate as a team or however many staff they have contribute, and that, again, can vary across the program, but that's the average across all the high schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so as we've had some of this discussion around fiscal notes and such, back to my question on kind of the track of the bill, wondering why this would be going back to education policy if it's already been heard there, or if it sounds like we have a fiscal note here and a fiscal note potentially in education finance, that I guess if we would wait and see if it's got a zero, but in my opinion, it should be staying here. The last time we did this, and if it's gonna be run through OHE, where we know there's gonna be a fiscal note if they're adding 1.5, why wouldn't it be staying in this jurisdiction where it's going to be financed through? And I guess, as it was just stated, I think, again, there is an impact on our local schools, and we talked about just in this last answer, the variety of people who might work on it at the high school. Again, you get to my small schools, they don't have all those people. They would have a principal or the superintendent working with their counselor, and they would have to figure out all those other roles because they don't have the technology specialist and they don't have these other folks. So that's, again, why this would be such a burden on our small schools, and they should be allowed to opt in when they're ready. But I guess, yeah, back to the question of why would it be leaving our jurisdiction until we know there's a fiscal note for education finance?
Sure. Senator Gustafson, do you have a preference?
No, Mr. Chair, whatever path you think is best. Can I clarify one of his statements if that's helpful? Okay, so it's 40 to 60 hours for the first school year. That doesn't have to be done in the first week. It can be over the span of 10 months of the school year. They're estimating about 40 to 60 hours. So let's say if you have a smaller school, it's 40 hours. So that's the first school year. Going forward, 20 hours per school year. So 40 hours the first school year, 20 hours in following school years. It won't cost the school anything, and more kids go to college. So I hear what you're saying, but you're talking about 40 hours over 10 months for whoever is available to put together a program that would allow more kids to go on to either two-year schools, vocational, community colleges, four-year schools, and again, at no cost to our schools. So a lot of schools are already doing this, and it is beneficial to the students. So it is really a student-first policy that does not put a lot of time or a lot of effort on the part of the school. They can manage 40 hours over 10 months.
So Senator Gustafson, would it be okay if we lay it over until we get a fiscal note?
Mr. Chair, that'd be fine.
Awesome. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and not to belabor this point, but I just wanted to say a couple of things. I'm sorry. If you look close enough, obviously, I'm in favor of the bill. I'm a co-author after all. I thought the testimony in education policy and hearing from folks that work at the district level was interesting and helpful. But what I think is on display right now during this committee is a byproduct of what happens when you mandate a lot of things to our schools in a very short amount of time. Nobody's in favor of a mandate until they find one that they like. I happen to like this one because I think it's going to get a lot of kids into college, and I think it's going to help them out quite a bit. But I think the points that have been raised by Senators Utke and Rarick are also valid, and trying to balance that and work with our districts, let them know we're coming from a place of good faith is important. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the experience over the last 2 years has both members of my caucus as well as school districts on high alert when St. Paul is up here crafting bills that are going to be what some would call mandates, especially ones that are unfunded and that are going to be imposed upon them. I do appreciate the timeline on this one. I think it's valid. And I'm not looking to rehash a K-12 debate here in higher education when it comes to funding and unfunded mandates or COVID funds or this, that, or the other. The takeaway is whatever we do in St. Paul from a state level and whatever we impose upon our school districts, especially if it comes with the cost or added man hours, we've got to be extremely mindful of. And we've got to listen to all stakeholders, most importantly, the ones at the district level that are going to have to implement this. So I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate that at some point this is going to find its way back to either education policy or education finance. But at the end of the day, any bill that we're going to consider that's going to impact our public schools deserves a lot of consideration. And the one thing I will say that's a carryover from the last couple of years is this. When they're banging on our doors and sounding alarm bells, that's the time to listen. And that's the time to truly hear what they have to say so that later on down the road, we're not having conversations that are preventing what might be a good bill from becoming law because they've been put through the ringer on bills more recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think earlier you had said that some schools receive stipends from OHE. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
Mr. Salasek.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Oumou Verbeten. We do have 2 contracts with the high schools. So there's the data sharing agreement. We also have a joint powers contract where we're able to share funds directly to the high school to offset costs. So I think there's been some concern about staff time devoted at the high school level. Those funds can be used to offset costs or to augment college knowledge or college access activity at the secondary level. And so we've had schools like Austin High School have an opening ceremony where all their students come to the gym, get their letter, open it, and sort of share collective joy. We have had other schools have a pizza party where they also chose and selected their colleges of choice. We have also had schools use some of that funding go directly to, again, one of the issues I brought up earlier, but e-transcript service funding to help offset those costs to the high schools and the districts too.
Thank you so much. Any closing comments, Senator Gustafson?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think so. This is good. It makes sense. We talk about workforce issues all the time. We say there's not enough people to work in nursing homes or hospitals or police force or teachers or nurses and all of the things that we know that we see a workforce shortage in. And then we say we're looking for a solution. This is a part of that solution. And that doesn't put too much burden on anybody in our communities. So that is, it's a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the input from our colleagues, Senators Duckworth, Rarick, and Utke, and I appreciate your support of their concerns. And with that, with concerns of the good, the bad, and the Utke, we'll lay this over. What was that? Putnam? Is Claire still going there?
I'm just trying to find out which one's good and which one's bad.
Welcome, Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have Senate File 1607, and I do have an author's amendment that I'd like to move.
Yes, Senator Oumou Verbeten moves the A1 amendment. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. and the amendment is adopted. Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm excited to present Senate File 1607 to the committee today. This bill addresses the critical need for investment in healthcare access and quality across Minnesota. The University of Minnesota is requesting $45 million in fiscal year 2026 to begin implementing its health sciences strategic plan, a plan that directly addresses key recommendations from the governor's task force on academic health. This bill takes 3 key elements from that request that are ready to be implemented now. The 3 elements are the Community University Health Care Center, or CUC, the Mobile Health Initiative, and the One Health Clinic. As we all know, Minnesota's healthcare landscape is changing. Our population is aging. Health systems are under increasing financial and operational strain, and far too many communities, particularly in rural and undeserved areas, lack access to essential healthcare services. And that includes dental care, mental health support, addiction treatment, and even veterinary care. The University of Minnesota, with its unique breadth of health sciences programs across multiple campuses, is prepared to meet this challenge. This investment will allow the university to expand its partnerships, integrate hands-on learning for students in underserved communities, and strengthen its mobile health, telehealth, and One Health Clinic initiatives. These efforts will not only train the next generation of healthcare professionals, but also bring high-quality care directly to those who need it most. By funding the Community University Health Care Center, Mobile Health Clinic, and One Health Clinic, we are making a commitment to a healthier Minnesota, one where no individual or community is left behind. And I urge your support for this investment in our state's health, our workforce, and our future. And I also just want to note, before we go to testifiers, that I know a number of our higher education committee members had an opportunity to tour CUC last year. I've been several times, but seeing them in action and just a great model of having, the dental care and the mental health care and everything sort of on site is just amazing work and is helping so many people. They have great needs, and they have people driving from all across the state to that clinic to access that health care. So they're in desperate need of some more support, but we'll hear from our testifiers.
Thank you so much, Senator Oumou Verbeten. First up is Roly Duevedi, Chief Executive Officer, University of Minnesota, Community University Healthcare Clinic. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and member of the committee. My name is Roly Duevedi. I serve as the CEO and Chief Clinical Officer for the Community University Healthcare Center, which goes by CUC, where I have worked for over 15 years, first visiting CUC as a family medicine physician resident. I'm a family medicine physician in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health at the University of Minnesota Medical School, as well as the current president of the Minnesota Academy of Family Physicians. It's nice to see some familiar faces here today, and it is sincerely an opportunity, great opportunity for me. And thank you to Senator Oumou Verbeten for championing the work we do at CUC with this funding request. CUC is Minnesota's first and oldest community health center located in Phillips neighborhood. We serve people of all ages and all income levels with compassion and care. Next year, we will be celebrating our 60th anniversary. We are a federally qualified healthcare center affiliated with the University of Minnesota. To our knowledge, the only one of its kind with a land-grant university. As one of 17 community health centers in Minnesota, we contribute to a national network of 1,400 health centers serving over 32 million patients. Last year, CUC provided nearly 50,000 visits to over 11,900 patients, half of whom prefer a language other than English, with 50% in Medicaid and 25% uninsured. We play a vital role in accessible health care. The majority of our patients' family incomes are below the federal poverty line. Our unique model integrates patient care with the hands-on training, shaping the next generation of Minnesota's healthcare workforce. CUC's mission is transforming care and educating to advance the health equity. Cook's vision is to premier education site which leads to team-based care and centers on person, family, and community experiences. Last year, we trained 185 learners who spent over 21,000 hours with us. 96% of those learners were from University of Minnesota. Every year for decades, we have been training nurses, physicians, dentists, social workers, therapists, dietitian, pharmacists, and many others. Last year, we had a group of University of Minnesota law students as well who spent time with us, learning about community health and the social drivers of health, like housing challenges and food insecurity. We welcome our first 3 data science graduate students as well last year. We train all our learners in our care model, which is whole person care that is culturally responsive and wraps services around the patient and the family. We integrate medical, behavioral health, and the dental services and many more for prevention and chronic disease management so our patient can live longer and healthier. We take care of families and communities. Sometimes I see multiple generations within the same family in the same day of the week. It happened yesterday. I saw an 86-year-old grandma, and then her daughter, which was 57-year-old, and then her daughter, which was 21-year-old. And it was a great experience for the learner that I had with me. It brings me a great joy, and it is a primary care in true sense. So why do we need the funding? We currently face many challenges at Cook, including inadequate resources and financial headwinds. Training the next generation of learners at our scale requires resources. We need preceptors who have time to teach. We need operations. We need technology that can support all these learners who rotate at clinic. An increase in funding would allow us to support the preceptor time for the clinicians. We will be able to restore the pharmacy residents back to 2 or 3 residents, stabilize the women's health program. Currently, we are creating losses in that program. We train DNP students in women's health as well. We will be able to expand specialty services like physical therapy, eye care, and expanded diabetes programming. And by doing that, we might be able to provide new and different training opportunities for new resident physicians. This would likely require us to purchase some equipment and some other things as well. And last but not the least, but provide more and improved technology to support all clinical staff and learners so that we can become more lean and more efficient. And with that, I would like to thank you for listening, Mr. Chair and members, and giving me this opportunity to speak in front of you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Before we continue, are there any questions from members? Senator Putnam.
Dr. DeViti, it's great to see you again. Thank you again for hosting us when we came out there. You know, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the budgetary pressures that you might currently be under, specifically relative to the chaos or confusion or uncertainty with federal funding.
Dr. DeViti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Pittman. It's hard. There are a lot of uncertainties, so we are thinking every single day about our budget and our finances and how do we survive. As I mentioned, our largest population is Medicaid, but we also serve a lot of people who are uninsured, and it creates a lot of pressure on a daily basis. So these are the real tough things that we are facing every day and try to problem solve as we go day by day.
Senator Putnam. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from members? Thank you, Doctor, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, we got Jonathan Kirsch, Clinical Director, University of Minnesota Mobile Health Initiative. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and the Senate Committee on Higher Education. My name is Jonathan Kirsch. I'm an internal medicine and addiction medicine doctor and associate professor at the University of Minnesota. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you, Senator Oumou Verbeten, for putting this bill forward. So since 2020, it has been a privilege for me to lead the Mobile Health Initiative for the university that has been taking a pioneering and multifaceted approach to increasing health equity and implementing expansion of healthcare services for thousands of Minnesotans in underserved communities across the state. It's my pleasure to share with you my experience of the successes to date of our mobile health initiative and the ways in which it can provide experiential learning for our future Minnesota healthcare workforce. We offer opportunities to health science students to obtain clinical training in underserved communities. And students from medicine, public health, dentistry, nursing, and pharmacy, amongst other students, work side by side and see firsthand the impact of interdisciplinary and innovative Minnesota-made solutions to current problems. So in recent years, we've cared for thousands of patients, most of whom did not have access to preventative health care. And we've identified hundreds of cases of diabetes, hypertension, and other conditions that might have otherwise gone unnoticed until a preventable crisis like a stroke occurred. And actually, if I sound tired, it's because I worked last night from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. I'm not complaining. I know you all work hard, too. Maybe not at night as much. But anyway, so I did want to share one thing, though, which actually, I had this written before last night. I met a patient last night and got his permission. I said, you know what, can I share my story with the legislature tomorrow? Because I actually have to talk about this. So it was interesting. So in fact, I met a man who had a stroke when he was in his 40s, which is really unfortunate, and had lost some function. And it happened about a year ago. He was being admitted at the hospital for a different reason, but I asked him, did you know what? You have some risk factors for having a stroke, right? Did you know that you had any of those before? And he said no. And I said, well, if you had known about that, would you have done anything differently? And he kind of responded to me like my kids would have, like saying, duh. So anyway, so yes, he would have done things very differently had he known ahead of time, but he just didn't have access. He was from a rural area and had not had screening done. So we prevented countless patients from seeking unnecessary use of emergency departments, saving them from excessive medical expenses, lost work, time, and other personal costs. You know, a recent study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association just a few months ago stated that trust in physicians and hospitals actually decreased from 70% down to 40% between 2020 and 2024. It's pretty remarkable. Our events, on the other hand, are incredibly popular. And these are also in the communities that are said to be the least trusting of healthcare. So something's working. So how do we do this? So mobile health, and that goes for Kook and the One Health Clinic you'll hear about as well. So how do we do this? So our mobile health initiative gains trust by caring for people where they work, live, pray, and play. So we form strategic partnerships and collaborations with community-based organizations, social enterprises, and nonprofits. And we bring low-barrier, evidence-based care to the most underserved communities in Minnesota, rural, urban, and indigenous. We want to grow over the next few years, and with funding, we can expand our program's reach and enhancement of services from several thousand patients annually to a goal of 25,000 per year. We serve over 20 community locations already, hosting more than 100 events, and have recruited and given opportunities for over 300 medical professionals and students for our events. So our partnership with social enterprises has led to 3 state-of-the-art mobile medical units that are currently being built that have broadband and telehealth capabilities so that the technology of a clinic can actually be brought closer to where people actually live. And we'll also be able to have real-time big data to understand how to better serve our communities with low-barrier preventative health care. So we need the support of legislature to build up this program and also help move it towards sustainability so it's not dependent on where our funding currently is, which is from foundations and some city grants. So investing in creative ways to reduce costs through preventative health is really essential. Innovative solutions like a mobile health initiative will serve as a national model by demonstrating that high-quality, low-barrier health care and low-cost care compassionately delivered to where people live, work, pray, and play is crucial. So on behalf of myself and the Mobile Health Initiative's dedicated team members and thousands of patients served, I thank you for your time today and interest in improving the delivery of health care for all underserved Minnesotans, and to help show future healthcare providers that effective and innovative solutions to the most pressing healthcare needs as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? Senator Clark.
Thank you, Chair Fate. And Presenter, Dr. Kirsch, you mentioned something I wanted to just key in on, that the patient you described was having care gaps in his rural setting and now care gaps in the urban setting that this is filling. Is that what I heard you saying?
He lived in a rural setting, but was admitted to an urban hospital, the university hospital. Yeah.
I think that's what I thank you, Chair Fate and Presenter. I think what I like about this, it's you're connecting where we have these healthcare deserts, whether it is in the middle of the city where I represent or rural, we need to be attacking both. And I thank you for highlighting one of the investments that we've made. And I hope we continue to make this investment just as we're hopefully making other investments around. So thank you for highlighting that connection for me.
Thank you.
Any other members? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Our final testifier is Aaron Burton, Senior Associate Dean, University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and begin.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, my name is Aaron Burton. I am a veterinarian, and I am the Senior Associate Dean of Academic and Student Affairs for the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Minnesota. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today in support of Senate File 1607. This provides critical funding for healthcare initiatives at the University of Minnesota. I'm here to really share the veterinary perspective on the One Health Clinica project, a groundbreaking initiative that integrates care for both people and their pets, so including the ones with tails, recognizing their interconnected health needs. This past July 2024, we successfully piloted the first One Health clinic in the East Phillips neighborhood of Minneapolis. During this clinic, the University of Minnesota Health Sciences students and faculty provided medical screenings for people and veterinary care for their pets within the same space. We saw firsthand how this model works. So this was a pilot project, so we initially saw 24 pets received veterinary exams and treatment from veterinary students with clinical faculty oversight. Both medical and pharmacy students, along with a veterinary social worker and their clinical faculty, provided care for 6 people, including one individual, or a person, not a pet, who had a very high glucose level and suggested a new diagnosis of diabetes. So that care potentially could be life-saving. Many clients had not sought medical care for themselves, but felt compelled to do so when it was offered alongside the care of their trusted pets and companions. This pilot clinic validated what we already know. People oftentimes prioritize their pet's health over their own. By offering medical and veterinary care side by side, the One Health Clinic serves as a bridge, helping individuals get the much-needed care they need while ensuring that their pets also remain healthy at the same time. Beyond its immediate impact, this initiative prepares the next generation of Minnesota's healthcare professionals. The One Health Clinic model fosters interdisciplinary collaboration among students in professions in veterinary medicine, human medicine, pharmacy, and social work. By working together, our students learn to navigate barriers to care, connect patients with essential resources like housing aid and food support, and develop a team-based approach to problem solving. This authentic type of hands-on interprofessional training is not just relevant in urban settings, it is essential also for rural healthcare. Many of the challenges we see in under-resourced urban communities, such as limited access to medical care, workforce shortages, and the reliance on a trusted community partnership and relationships. These are the same challenges as have many of those my colleagues have noted today, faced also by our rural healthcare professionals. By learning how to work in interprofessional teams early in their careers, our students gain the skills to collaborate across disciplines, problem-solving complex cases together, and build strong community networks, or that sense of belonging, whether they practice in the Twin Cities or a small rural town in greater Minnesota. I want to share testimony from one of my favorite students who participated in the One Health Clinic. She describes the clinic this best. She's a student that comes from a rural background. Being open to new ways of approaching problems is a great skill for every veterinarian to have. This is especially important for veterinarians that will be working in a rural setting. Rural veterinarians do not have the same ability to refer specialists or transfer patients to emergency rooms, or what we call emergency rooms, that urban practicing veterinarians do. Learning to serve many different people and learning how to work with them to make the best individualized care plan for their pet is a special skill for veterinarians to acquire. This skill can be demonstrated and learned in metropolitan areas where there's a high caseload, also another diverse client population and background, and the ability to collaborate with various specialists and other inter-health professionals. I think this sentiment underscores why we want, or why I and we want every veterinary student at the University of Minnesota to participate in this One Health Clinic experience prior to graduation. To do this, we need sustainable funding and support to expand the program, establish a permanent location, and increase clinic frequency to meet the demand we saw during our pilot and initial event. This is why Senate File 1607 is so important to me. Investing in the One Health Clinic will allow us to serve vulnerable communities more effectively, train future healthcare professions in a truly authentic and integrated way, and improve health outcomes for both people and animals, whether they're in their urban centers or rural Minnesota. I urge you all to support this bill and help Minnesota lead the way to a holistic, community-driven healthcare approach. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members? Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am very curious about this program. Are there other, is this unique to the University of Minnesota or other schools around the country doing this? I know, I forayed a little into disaster management. I know, people do not want to leave their homes and go if they can't take their pets with them when they're in evacuation situations. I'm just curious, do other schools do this as well, or?
Dean Burton.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kubik, yes, so the One Health Clinic that we piloted at the University of Minnesota is modeled off of one that's in Washington State through their programs that they have there. So there is one in Washington, the state of Washington. It's been going on for many years and is a huge success.
Senator Kupek.
Just one final, well, I applaud you for picking this up. This is, I think, a really unique approach to get, and it's funny how so many people their pets will guide them to get health care too as well. So thanks for sharing this with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like on the first bill I asked, I did not find a companion in the other chamber. Are you working with anyone over there to get it introduced?
Senator Oumou Verbeten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Rarick. Yes, I am working with folks to get this introduced in the House, hopefully next week.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Rarick. Any other questions from members? Any final comments, Senator Oumou Verbeten?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just, again, encourage folks, if you haven't had an opportunity to visit the Kook or meet with folks with the Mobile Health Initiative or the One Health Clinic, I think it's just really helpful to see these programs in action and hope that we can find some resources to support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Rarick, you want to move it to Ed Finance? The bill is laid over. We're now adjourned.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.